My name is Jamon McKinney, but of course you can just call me Juice because that is my nickname. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, into the latest edition of the Juice Alert, hosted by yours truly right here, right now. If you have not subscribed to the Juice Alert already, be sure to do that right about now. You will not regret it. You can find the Juice Alert on YouTube, as well as podcasting platforms that includes Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, all that great stuff. If you enjoy what you are listening to or watching, be sure to leave this podcast a 5-star review on podcasting platforms. If you're watching here and listening on YouTube, be sure to leave this episode a like. Comment some things, comment your feedback on my opinions, what you like, what you don't like. We'd love to hear from you guys and all that great stuff. We're going to get into a couple of topics today. Actually, I have 5 topics lined up for today. We're going to talk about the Broncos. We're going to talk about the Houston Texans. We're going to talk about the New York Jets, the Chicago Bears. A very, very solid show lined up for you guys today. But before I do get started, I just want to also say you can follow me and this show both on social media. All the social media links are in the description of this episode. If you're watching here on YouTube, as you can see, I put the social media handles on the screen for you guys to screenshot, maybe quickly pause this episode and jot those handles down. Would love to connect with you guys on social media and things of that nature. And lastly, follow me and other great content creators on MLBBro.com. MLBBro.com was founded by the great Rob Parker. And basically at MLBBro.com, we all specialize in covering the game of baseball, but highlighting African Americans in the game of baseball, whether it be past, present, future, all that great stuff. Be sure to check us out. We'd love to see you guys following that on different platforms. Oh man, where do I begin? We got to talk about the Denver Broncos. The Denver Broncos just lost to the Miami Dolphins 70-20 this past week. Russell Wilson and the Denver Broncos have become an unmitigated disaster. It is an absolute dumpster fire. It's a disaster. Ladies and gentlemen, the National Football League has been available to us all for over 100 years. Only 3 times in the history of the National Football League has a team scored 70 or more points. One of those teams is the 2023 Denver Broncos, led by Sean Payton and Russell Wilson. Let me tell you something right now. Glancing at that game and watching that game, if this were my first time watching an NFL football game and I turned on Dolphins versus Broncos with no knowledge whatsoever, I would be asking myself seriously, is this a CFL team? I mean, guys, it looked like prime Nick Saban and Alabama versus Southern Arkansas. People, it was that bad. And we have to be real about Russell Wilson and the Denver Broncos. Since Russell Wilson has come to Denver, we're 2 years in, not fully 2 years in, but you get the point. Russell Wilson has won only 22% of his games. I mean, folks, the Denver Broncos were winning more games when Drew Lock was starting for them a couple of years ago. Drew Lock, in a 21-game sample size, has a record with the Denver Broncos as their starter of 8-13. Everyone called Drew Lock terrible, trash, and said he was a bust. And those things were warranted, and those headlines were true. But you look at Russell Wilson, who many people believe to be a Hall of Fame level quarterback, a guy that could get in the Hall of Fame one day. The Broncos are 4-14 so far to this point with Russell Wilson as their starter. I mean, you're not getting much of an upgrade here, people. I don't really see what is going on in Denver. It's baffling to me. I don't understand it. Russell Wilson, we have to admit this, he is rapidly declining. He's a rapidly declining quarterback. And a lot of people thought that Russell Wilson would take a massive leap this season with the Broncos, with Sean Payton coming to town. Has Russell Wilson been better than last year? Yes, he has, but that is not saying much because last season, the Denver Broncos, led by Russell Wilson and then Nathaniel Hackett, it was arguably the worst offense in the entire National Football League. Now, that's improved a little bit, but like I said, not saying much. The Broncos have not taken this massive leap forward under Russell Wilson being the quarterback and now Sean Payton coming to town. Okay, I don't see a path for Russell Wilson and the Denver Broncos ever truly being great. I just don't quite see it. I mean, I really don't. You know, you look at Sean Payton, you said, okay, this is a guy that helped save Drew Brees' career, arguably helped turn Drew Brees into a Hall of Fame quarterback. Drew Brees was struggling in San Diego. Finds Sean Payton, boom, he takes off, he wins the Super Bowl, rides into the sunset. Drew Brees is an awesome thrower of the football, but you have to give Sean Payton a lot of credit as well. You look at Russell Wilson, you thought, man, you know, Russell Wilson had a lot of success in Seattle, kind of had a down year last year in Denver, but man, you know, if he can just get with Sean Payton, it's going to work, and we're left with very mediocre results. In fact, the Broncos haven't even won a game yet under Russell Wilson and Sean Payton. They're 0-3. Now, again, like I said, I don't see the path for the Broncos being a great football team in a conference with the Kansas City Chiefs, the Jacksonville Jaguars, and that division has become very, very frisky. Jacksonville's division, you're talking about also the Miami Dolphins, the Buffalo Bills. You know, we'll see if Aaron Rodgers can return to the New York Jets. I would take the entire AFC North over the Denver Broncos in terms of what they have on paper and their potential future, looking at the outcome of all four of those teams. I don't see a path for the Broncos being a great football team under this regime. You're paying Russell Wilson a crap ton of money. It's hard to move on from Russell Wilson. And people can say, oh, well, the Broncos can just go and draft Caleb Williams. You know, he's the answer. You know, the great USC quarterback. First of all, you don't know if Caleb Williams is going to be a slam dunk star. We all think he's going to be a slam dunk star, but we've seen high level quarterbacks in college, you know, come to the NFL and not do, you know, jack you know what. But the point is, here's the thing, people. Are the Broncos ever going to get to that point to be able to grab Caleb Williams? Because Sean Payton doesn't seem like he wants to tank. You know for a fact Russell Wilson knows his reputation is on the line. By no means does Russell Wilson want the Denver Broncos to be in a position to draft a guy like Caleb Williams. You're probably going to have the first overall pick to get that big-time starter quarterback that you guarantee that you really, really like. And I think that Denver, look, it's been a disaster, but this is not the most untalented team in the National Football League. You get what I'm saying? I think the Broncos will squeak out a couple of wins here and there, but the Broncos did not bring Russell Wilson and Sean Payton to town to just squeak out a couple of wins here and there, to just be around 500. No, people. This was supposed to be a Super Bowl formula for the Denver Broncos. You know, you had all these great pieces. You thought you had the weapons. You thought you had the defense. All you needed was the quarterback and head coach combination, and it just doesn't quite fit. I think Sean Payton and Russell Wilson, we're finding out they're kind of an odd fit. You know, we don't know if Sean Payton still has that juice. To me, it seems like he's a lot more talk rather than actions these days. You know, he's going to the podium, putting up all these great quotes. We don't see any results on the football field. And listen, people, when you lose 70-20 in an NFL football game, you lose by 50 points. It is not just solely on one player or one unit on your football team. There's an issue top to bottom on the Broncos roster and in the Broncos front office. I'm not saying you got to tear down the entire regime and things like that, but man, there needs to be some major changes going forward in Denver if this cannot improve. I mean, again, Russell Wilson and the Denver Broncos, they've turned into a disaster, and it's a sad story because I thought Russell Wilson could maybe come in and be a great feel-good story, and it hasn't happened so far. The Broncos are an unmitigated disaster up to this point. How do you lose by 50 points in an NFL football game? I understand the Dolphins are very talented. I get that you have a bad Sunday or two, but man, have the players quit on Sean Payton? Have they quit on Russell Wilson? Have these guys lost the locker room? Because when you're losing by 50 in an NFL football game boy, oh boy, do you got some issues. It's hard to wrap your arms around it and your head around it, but that's the reality. And, Russell Wilson and the Denver Broncos, along with Sean Payton, a lot of questions moving forward regarding their future. I want to briefly touch on Russell Wilson and Sean Payton just for a little bit longer. Are Sean Payton and Russell Wilson an odd fit together? What do I mean by that? First of all, being an odd fit doesn't automatically mean you're going to fail, because you look at Bruce Arians and Tom Brady. Bruce Arians and Tom Brady were an odd fit, but they collaborated together, they made it work, and it seemed like the roster was just so talented that as long as those guys were kind of on the same page, you felt Tampa Bay was going to win football games and eventually get to and win a Super Bowl if things bounced their way, and boom, it happened, okay? So there are exceptions to the rule as far as, personalities not quite fitting together, but everyone talked about Sean Payton and the Denver Broncos, and they said Sean Payton is going to fix Russell Wilson. First of all, so far that has not happened through the first couple of games, and you have to realize this. Sean Payton is supposed to be the CEO of the football team. When you're a head coach, you're responsible for all 53 men on that roster, not just the quarterback. And I think everyone focused on, okay, what could Sean Payton get out of Russell Wilson? Is Russell Wilson going to get back on track? Are we going to fix Russell Wilson? When the reality is, people should have been asking the question, can Sean Payton fix the Denver Broncos altogether? You look at the offensive line. It seems like the offensive line has a lot of holes, has some major questions. You look at, the depth at wide receiver. The Denver Broncos have suffered some major injuries at wide receiver, and it seems like they don't have much to work with. As much as we hype up the roster, it doesn't seem like the depth at wide receiver is all that great. You look at Sean Payton and this team. You're losing by 50 points to a Miami Dolphins team. Again, there's not just one glaring issue. There's multiple things here. Top to bottom, this entire roster needs to be examined. And you look at Sean Payton, and you say, can he be the true CEO of this football team? That was a knock on him in New Orleans, where they put up a bunch of points, but he never could seem to really figure out the defense. Defense isn't really a specialty. It seems like the Saints at times were a little bit undisciplined. They won a Super Bowl with Sean Payton. God bless them. They won a lot of games, but there were some years where it seems like, man, every single year the Saints seem like they're going 7-9, and they've got good players and a Hall of Fame quarterback in Drew Brees. What's going on? So have we overrated Sean Payton a little bit? I think we should ask that question a little bit. But here's the thing, people. Sean Payton is intense. He calls his players out. And losing football games really riles the guy up. And rightfully so. I don't like to lose. I'm sure you people out there don't like to lose. I'm sure Broncos country is just fed up at this point. But everyone has different personalities. Russell Wilson is one of those guys where his personality is not like Sean Payton's. Russell Wilson is naturally a calm human being. He's optimistic. He's always looking for the positives. Russell Wilson is the ultimate competitor. He's a gamer, at least going back to the Seattle Seahawks days and back when he was in college, maybe he's lost a little bit of that juice. But the point is, obviously Russell Wilson doesn't like to lose football games, but Russell Wilson is the type of quarterback to come to the podium after a tough loss and say, hey man, we gave it our all. We thought we had a good week of practice, but I really liked what we built on this week. I think that we can really, build on this for next week. We'll get this team next week and things like that. Sean Payton is not that guy. He's going to come to the podium, and if he loses and gets embarrassed, he's going to be pissed off, people. And if you're not perfect, then Sean Payton is going to make life very tough for you. And I think that that's kind of what we're seeing in Denver, where they had not gotten off to a great start. The first two games of the season, you have a game that you could have won versus the Raiders. It got away from you. You had a game versus the Commanders where you had a huge lead. It got away from you. And then you sparkle into this week where we're saying, okay, you're 0-2. If you're falling 0-3, your season might be over. And boom, out of nowhere, the Broncos just implode. And I think that has to take on some responsibility of the head coach and the quarterback, where they're not in sync. And it seems like the Broncos are trying to take on the personality that is Sean Payton, because Russell Wilson, I mean, it seems like the locker room has kind of lost faith in him based on what he did last year and based on the fact that we haven't seen a drastic improvement, And in the end, the Broncos are not winning games. Winning cures all. In Denver, they're not winning games. And last but not least, stylistically, when we look at Drew Brees and Russell Wilson, okay? Sean Payton's, old quarterback Drew Brees, who's going to make the Hall of Fame, Super Bowl champion. Meanwhile, Russell Wilson, potential Hall of Fame level quarterback, won a Super Bowl, had a lot of success in Seattle, but over the past couple of years has been on the decline. Let's look at them stylistically. Drew Brees lived on the quick passing game. He won with timing, and he targeted the middle of the field a lot. Russell Wilson, his brand of football is running around, throwing the deep ball, and attacking outside the numbers mostly. Russell Wilson is not this quarterback that lives over the middle of the field. He will attack the middle of the field if he needs to, but that's stylistically not his game. And when we look at Drew Brees and Russell Wilson, they're two totally different quarterbacks. So is this stylistically working? I'm not so sure. So that's really how I'm going to wrap things up with this. Sean Payton and Russell Wilson, it just seems like it's an odd fit, and I don't think that this is going to be solved anytime soon. I'm bailing on the Denver Broncos. I was optimistic last year, and that was a mistake. And this year, I did not buy into the hype. I thought they'd be improved, but it just seems like they're never going to take that great leap forward that you thought they would be taking when they signed Russell Wilson, or I should say acquired him from Seattle. And as I said a couple of weeks ago, and even last year, it looks like Seattle is getting an all-time heist in this trade because they have stability at quarterback already with Geno Smith. They've got a lot of good young players, and it seems like Seattle is set up for the future regardless if they win a Super Bowl this year or not. Meanwhile, Denver, they packaged all of their assets to try to win a Super Bowl right here, right now, and it just hasn't quite worked. And when that happens, sometimes you have to blow things up. Okay, everyone, I'm going to take a short break. When I return, I will talk about the Houston Texans. Don't go anywhere, people. This is Jamal McKinney. You are tuned into the Juice Alert. I want to talk about CJ Stroud. CJ Stroud, out of Ohio State, comes into the Houston Texans organization, second overall pick. Pretty high expectations considering the fact that CJ Stroud had a lot of success at Ohio State. The Houston Texans are in desperate need of a franchise quarterback. Let me tell you something right now. CJ Stroud brings much needed juice to the Houston Texans franchise. He gives fans a reason to tune into the Houston Texans games. And listen, people, I said when he was drafted that he's going to be a bigger and better version of Matt Ryan as an NFL starting quarterback. And so far, I know it's early, but this is the direction we're trending towards, folks. CJ Stroud has looked the part. He's trending up. I think he's only going to get better and better. He's been as good as advertised. There were some reasons to think, okay, maybe CJ Stroud could struggle out the gate because the Texans went the route of hiring a defensive-minded head coach in DeMeco Ryans. And they, in the draft, mostly invested in defense, going after Will Anderson, a very talented player out of the University of Alabama. So we were wondering, okay, can CJ Stroud overcome the Texans' past mess and potential dysfunction? Is a defensive-minded head coach the guy that's going to get the most out of him? CJ Stroud has looked tremendous so far to start his career. He eventually probably will hit the rookie wall at some point, but I'm pretty much sold. I was sold on him based on when he was in college, and it doesn't take for long, in my opinion, to recognize folks that can play in the NFL. Guys, he's accurate. He doesn't make very many mistakes. He throws with timing and anticipation. He has underrated physical tools. I think his arm strength is very, very underrated. He throws a beautiful deep ball, throws a naturally very catchable football. The athleticism is good enough. He checks pretty much all these boxes off. He's playing at a seasoned veteran level at this moment, he's only a rookie. I mean, he looks like a seasoned veteran out there. The way he's going through his progressions, the way, he's making these high-level decisions, the way the Texans are trusting this guy to command their offense. Folks, coaches will tell you how they feel about their quarterback based on the way they call plays. The Houston Texans have asked CJ Stroud to throw the ball a lot as a rookie. And that's a green flag, because when you're asking your rookie quarterback to go out there and throw the ball 44 times versus a very good Ravens defense and 47 times versus a pretty good Colts defense, that tells me all I need to know. These people in that building, they believe in CJ Stroud. I believe CJ Stroud is going to be a star in the making for the Houston Texans, and as an NFL starting quarterback, if the Houston Texans continue to build a legitimate roster around CJ Stroud. The Houston Texans missed out on a major opportunity to become a great football team for a very long time with Deshaun Watson as their quarterback. There were some off-the-field issues, and ultimately, Deshaun Watson wanted out. It was a very, very sad story. I did not think they maximized their opportunity with Deshaun Watson, but they've hit the reset button, and they've got a pretty good rebound in CJ Stroud, okay? I think this kid can play. I really do. I'm sold on CJ Stroud. I was sold on him coming out of Ohio State, and he provides much-needed juice for the Houston Texans. He gives them hope. He gives them the idea that, okay, because we have a franchise quarterback potentially, we can compete, we can start making moves, we can start investing in this player, and we can start to really, truly build this thing from the ground up the right way. I'm excited to see what CJ Stroud does going forward. I think he's the real deal, and I'm already pretty sold on CJ Stroud. Like I said, he's bringing much-needed juice to a Texans franchise that has needed a lot of it for a long time. When it comes to Zach Wilson and the New York Jets, let's talk about it. I'm just going to flatly say it. Zach Wilson is a bust. He's a bust. I have to admit it, people. Now, let me just say this. Usually, it doesn't take you long to know if a guy has special sauce or not. You look at Patrick Mahomes, Joe Burrow, Russell Wilson from the past in Seattle. These guys were great immediately. And there's been exceptions. You look at Josh Allen, Jalen Hurts, Jared Goff, even a Hall of Fame quarterback by the likes of Drew Brees, where these guys struggled out the gate. Their rookie season was kind of rocky, kind of choppy, but as the Bills, the Eagles, the Rams at the time, and the Saints built around the likes of Josh Allen, Jalen Hurts, and Jared Goff and Drew Brees, by about year number 3, people in the building were comfortable with those guys and said, okay, these guys can play. We're in year number 3 for Zach Wilson, and I just have major questions. I don't see it. I don't see the blueprint for this guy being a successful long-term franchise quarterback for any NFL team. I just don't see it. I think he's way too reckless. I think he is not accurate enough, doesn't make good enough decisions. I just think that he was overrated and overhyped as a prospect to begin with. His talent isn't as eye-popping as some people made it out to be when he was at BYU. I mean, we're in year number 3, 24 starts, so a pretty sizable sample size right here. 17 touchdown passes, 22 interceptions, 55% completion percentage, and a QBR in the low 30s. He's a bust, people. And keep in mind, the Jets have given this guy a star wide receiver in Garrett Wilson, good tight ends, above average running backs, a solid defense. And say what you want about Robert Saleh, but that guy finds ways to win games, even despite his quarterback's limitations, And you can say, oh, well, he's a defensive-minded coach. Zach Wilson can't succeed with a defensive-minded coach. Look at Josh Allen with Sean McDermott. Looks good to me. CJ Stroud in Houston. We've seen it in the first 3 games with a defensive-minded head coach. He can play. If you can play, you'll figure it out. You can say, oh, what about the offensive line? What about that? I understand the offensive line hasn't been great, but I just saw Joe Burrow literally carry one of the worst offensive lines I've ever seen to a Super Bowl. Joe Burrow finds ways to overcome. And he's able to overcome because he's a very talented player. Zach Wilson, he's not in that boat. And listen, people, in the National Football League, it is rarely perfect for you. You look at Tom Brady and all the support he had where they said, oh, he had Belichick, he had a run game. For many years, we looked at the Patriots wide receiver core and we said, man, does Tom Brady have enough great pass catchers to help him out? I'm just saying, people. And look, when I call Zach Wilson a bust, it's not something I take pleasure in saying because I usually like to see what a quarterback or another player at a different position can look like on another team. Okay, it didn't work out for this team. Let's see what happens with this next team. Where in the past, let's look at some guys. Dwayne Haskins. I don't consider Dwayne Haskins to be a bust because I never got to see what he could be potentially with the Pittsburgh Steelers before he unfortunately died and had his life taken away, And the situation in Washington wasn't all that great. I looked at Sam Darnold. Even though I was not a big Sam Darnold fan at USC, I said, okay, didn't work out with the Jets. Let's see what he can do in Carolina before I evaluate him as a bust. And we saw it did not work out in Carolina. He's a backup quarterback in San Francisco. Just hasn't worked. It didn't work with multiple teams. Josh Rosen got so many chances to prove himself as an NFL starting quarterback, and it just never worked out. So many chances, so many opportunities. But when it comes to Zach Wilson, I've just seen enough. I don't think that this guy can play. And again, he's been given the pieces to succeed. So I'm wondering if he can't succeed with a star wide receiver, above average run game, good coach, good defense, where is he going to succeed? Okay, I just don't see it. Zach Wilson to me was one of the most overrated and overhyped prospects coming out of college I've ever seen. I mean, NFL executives, I looked back at some of the headlines, and there was one NFL executive that, according to Bleacher Report, was claiming Zach Wilson may be as talented of an athlete as Patrick Mahomes and Aaron Rodgers. Boy, oh boy, did that take age like spoiled milk, people. I didn't see it in college with Zach Wilson at BYU. This guy was losing to the likes of Toledo and Hawaii, and you're telling me this is a top 3 pick? A guy that's going to change a franchise? I never saw it. I warned the New York Jets, stay away from Zach Wilson. They didn't listen to me, obviously, because they're just going to do what they want to do. And let's keep in mind, people, Zach Wilson got the fortune to sit behind and learn from that bad man Aaron Rodgers. Super Bowl winning quarterback, multiple time MVP award winner. Many people consider Aaron Rodgers to be maybe the most gifted thrower of the football of all time. It doesn't seem like Zach Wilson has learned much from Aaron Rodgers, and this is just a lesson in life that it doesn't matter, if you have a great tutor or great support. If you just don't have it, you just don't have it. And unfortunately, I just think Zach Wilson is being put in a situation where he's not going to succeed because he does not have the requisite skills to be an NFL starting quarterback. Again, a lot of quarterbacks are super talented, but it's about consistency. It's about, the little things. And Zach Wilson just doesn't check those boxes off. I've seen enough. And I'm not ruling out the possibility of Zach Wilson being a journeyman in the NFL. He could be potentially a Case Keenum one day or a Colt McCoy, where these guys, they stick around the National Football League. They aren't necessarily starters, but they, stick around the NFL, bounce from team to team, and they've made a crap ton of money from being a backup quarterback. I would think that Zach Wilson can be that guy because he's talented enough to be in the NFL. But in terms of saying, okay, Zach Wilson, here are the keys to our franchise. Go be our starting quarterback and go try to lead us to a Super Bowl. That is a formula that no one should want a part of because Zach Wilson, he's chaotic, he's reckless, he just is not consistent enough to be an NFL starting quarterback. And not even the tutelage of Aaron Rodgers can save Zach Wilson. And that tells me all I need to know. Again, I think Zach Wilson is a good guy. It seems like a guy that you want to root for, but unfortunately, let's call it like it is, people. It seems like Zach Wilson is a bust, and that is my claim today, right here, right now. Regardless of the team, I don't see Zach Wilson succeeding in the NFL. He's going to probably play out the season as the Jets starting quarterback, and we'll see where this takes him. Maybe he can build on some success, but I just don't see it. Last but not least, I want to talk about Matt Eberflus. I really don't like to write people off quickly. I like to give people opportunities to prove themselves and say, okay, where can this thing go? But anything we know about sports is sometimes you got to know when to rip the Band-Aid off. And sometimes when you rip the Band-Aid off more quickly, it can pay off for you. When it comes to the Chicago Bears, you got to rip the Band-Aid off. Matt Eberflus, to me, is not the guy. I thought hiring Matt Eberflus was a mistake in the first place. And everyone's been giving Brandon Staley, Los Angeles Chargers head coach, a lot of crap lately, and rightfully so, because Brandon Staley, to me, it just doesn't seem like he has the stuff to be an NFL head coach. But why is no one holding Matt Eberflus accountable when we talk about, Brandon Staley, defensive-minded guy, but hasn't quite clicked with the Chargers? Where's the great defenses? We have to ask the same question about Matt Eberflus, people. Defensively, the Chicago Bears are awful. I mean, they're not watchable at this point, okay? And you thought this offseason, okay, you're spending a little bit of money on the defense, maybe it's not going to be this amazing unit, but we should see at least some improvements. We haven't seen the improvements, people. We haven't. And as much crap as I give Brandon Staley, at least Brandon Staley's been to the playoffs. At least he's got a winning record. You look at a guy like Matt Eberflus, he's won 15% of his games up to this point. 15% is not good enough. And I don't think that number is going to improve anytime soon because I don't really see much hope for the Chicago Bears. I really don't. And I'm not trying to make this a Brandon Staley, Matt Eberflus comparison, so I'm going to scrap the Brandon Staley stuff and takes right there. But the point is, all I'm trying to say is Brandon Staley sold to the Chargers, and I'm a defensive-minded guy. So when you're selling to me, you're a defensive-minded guy, I expect your defense to be excellent. You look at Robert Saleh. He told the Jets, I'm a defensive-minded head coach. So far, so good. The defense has been pretty darn good with Robert Saleh manning the ship. Matt Eberflus, that defense in Chicago, it stinks. It's no good. And there's major questions I have. There's improvements that need to be made. And I think Matt Eberflus was part of the problem because he was supposed to plug these holes up, and the holes are still leaking. And you look at Justin Fields, okay? This is a guy the Chicago Bears traded up for in the draft. And listen, I was a big Justin Fields fan at Ohio State when he was there. I felt that, the talent was just so eye-popping. I was like, okay, Chicago hit a home run here. It's a very talented quarterback that they can invest in for the future. He should be able to potentially be the guy that can be the right guy for Chicago going forward. Here's the thing, people. It hasn't really looked all that great with Justin Fields, but I will say this. Justin Fields, to me, it seems like he needs an offensive-minded head coach. And the Bears, they went the route of a defensive-minded head coach. Now, I don't know if they're going to keep Justin Fields as their quarterback for another year or two because the Bears might have the first overall pick again this season. But let's say Justin Fields shows us enough going forward that you can invest in him. Don't you think you owe it to the guy to see what it looks like with an offensive-minded head coach? Because it just seems like Matt Eberflus, there's no juice with his defenses, so why do I have room for him? Justin Fields is supposed to be the guy that we're invested in for the long term. So I need to find a way to get the most out of Justin Fields. If you save Justin Fields' career, more than likely, there will be a trickle-down positive effect on your franchise because if you get the most out of your quarterback, it's going to elevate the offensive line, the wide receivers, you're going to score more points, you're going to win more games. So I think even though Justin Fields has left a lot to be desired on the football field, he has not truly progressed as a thrower of the football like a lot of people thought he was going to up to this point. But again, I think Justin Fields is someone that I'm willing to continue to work with. When it comes to Matt Eberflus, I just don't think he was ever really qualified to be the head coach of the Chicago Bears. Maybe I'm wrong because he did have some decent, defenses when he was the defensive coordinator in Indianapolis. But you saw year to year where one year the defense was pretty good. The next year it wasn't all that great. The defense never truly was an elite unit when Matt Eberflus was manning the ship as a defensive coordinator there. But the bottom line is, regardless of what his qualifications were he's here right now, but the results are not here. This guy is winning not even 20% of his games. You might have the first overall pick again this year. You cannot go into next year convincing that fan base in Chicago that's passionate, spends a lot of money. Chicago's a big-time market. You can't sell, oh, yeah, we're going to win games because Matt Eberflus is awesome. No, he's not. We've seen this. He's not that great. And I think the Chicago Bears, they made a mistake hiring him. So the best way to pivot towards the positive direction is to rip the Band-Aid off as quickly as possible. Sometimes you just got to say, okay, we whiffed. Okay, let's move on. Let's try to move on, mend this ship right here, and get things going a lot better. And I think the best way the Chicago Bears can do that is finding an offensive-minded head coach that can get the most out of Justin Fields and getting rid of Matt Eberflus, because I just don't think that he has the upside to be a great head coach. I don't know if the locker room even really trusts him anymore, because that effort that they showed versus Kansas City, I know Kansas City is the defending Super Bowl champions, but it was a piss-poor effort on the Chicago Bears' part, and you can sometimes see based on lack of effort, some guys just are, they bail on the head coach, and I think that in Chicago, a lot of people are bailing on Matt Eberflus, and rightfully so. And again, I take no pleasure in saying this because Matt Eberflus, I never want a guy to fail. He's a guy that comes from Ohio. I'm a graduate of the University of Toledo. This guy is born in Toledo, Ohio. Ohio is dear to his heart, just like Ohio is dear to my heart. I don't want Matt Eberflus to fail, but again, I have to call it a spade and call it like it is. I don't think Matt Eberflus is the answer for the Chicago Bears. And I think the Chicago Bears made a mistake hiring him in the first place, and they should rip the Band-Aid off to try to save Justin Fields and get that franchise going in a positive direction. Well, folks, that's pretty much all I have today. Thank you so much for tuning in today. My name is Jamal McKinney. Thank you for tuning into the Juice Alert. Be sure to comment, like, subscribe, rate, review, share, all that great stuff. Until next time.